When my grandfather died, everyone assumed the ranch would be sold off to developers. Instead, I took a leave from my job, signed a stack of papers, and quietly became the owner of acres of pasture, hills, and scrubland outside a growing town. What no one in the shiny new subdivision next door knew was that I also stepped into my other role, the new CEO of the national company that managed their HOA, and hundreds of others across the country. The first morning I drove my dusty truck back through the old ranch gate, I noticed it right away. Rows of pastel houses, matching mailboxes, and a big stone sign that read Silver Creek Meadows, an HOA community. My grandfather had told me developers had leased a small corner, but it hit different seeing it in person. Their perfectly edged lawns ended abruptly at our old barbed wire fence. On one side, sprinklers and SUVs. On the other, cattle, mesquite, and my grandfather's weathered barn. By the second day, I had my welcome gift. A bright notice taped to my ranch gate. Unregistered vehicle, non-compliant exterior structure, unauthorized livestock visible from street. I laughed so hard I had to lean on the truck. The non-compliant exterior structure was my barn, a barn that had stood there since before most of those homeowners were born. The unauthorized livestock were my cattle, grazing on land that had been in my family for generations. That's when I met her. She marched up the dirt road in heels that had no business being on gravel, clipboard in one hand and phone in the other. Blonde bob, tight blazer, a name tag that read Karen Whitfield, HOA president. "You can't park that rusty truck where everyone can see it," she announced without so much as a hello. "And this area does not meet community standards." "This area," I said, "is a working ranch, and you're standing on it without permission." She clicked her tongue. "This land is within view of Silver Creek Meadows. That makes it subject to our visual compliance rules. We have guidelines on vehicles, outbuildings, and livestock." I held up the violation notice. "You know this doesn't mean anything off your subdivision, right?" She gave me a tight smile, the kind people use when they think they're indulging a stupid child. "That's not how this works. I'll give you 2 weeks to bring everything up to code." Then she turned and walked away, already typing furiously into her phone. I could have ended it there. I could have said, "Actually, I run the company that runs your HOA, and I own the land under half your houses." But if there's one thing my grandfather taught me, it's this. When someone builds their whole world on fake power, you don't argue with them. You let reality do the work. Over the next few days, I went about my business, checking fences, meeting with a ranch foreman, walking the property lines with the survey maps my lawyer sent. I watched HOA board members drive slowly along the fence, taking pictures of my cows as if they were evidence of a crime. New notices showed up. Noise complaint, tractor after 6 p.m., unapproved fencing, even dust violation. My foreman, Lucas, just shook his head. "City people," he muttered. "They move next to a ranch and then complain the grass isn't plastic." Things escalated when I moved back into the ranch house. The place had been empty for a while, and I spent a whole weekend cleaning, fixing, and hauling furniture in. Lights on after dark apparently pushed Karen over the edge. 3 days later, as I was unloading feed out of the truck, I heard sirens. I looked up the long driveway and saw 2 county sheriff's SUVs crest the hill, followed closely by a white Lexus SUV. Karen at the wheel. The deputies parked carefully by the fence. Karen pulled in like she owned the place. She got out of the car before the officers even had their doors open. "That's him," she called out, pointing directly at me. "He broke in here. This is supposed to be common ranch land. He's ignoring HOA rules, and he's been disturbing the community all week." The older deputy gave her a look that said he'd heard this tone before. Then he walked over to me while the younger deputy hung back, watching. "Morning," I said, setting the feed sack down and wiping my hands. "What's going on?" "We got a call about a possible trespasser and some kind of HOA dispute," the older deputy said. "Can I see some ID?" "Sir, sure thing." I pulled out my wallet and handed over my driver's license. "Name's Ryan Harlan. This is my place." Behind him, Karen huffed. "This is community land. The developer promised it would match the neighborhood aesthetic. He doesn't even live here." He just showed up and started using it like some wild ranch. The deputy waited until he'd checked my ID before he turned back to her. "Ma'am, let me sort this out." "Fine," she snapped, folding her arms. "Just make sure he understands he can't violate our bylaws." I almost felt bad for her. "Deputy," I said, "if it helps, I got some paperwork inside that might clear this up." He nodded. "Let's take a look." We walked up the porch steps into the old ranch house. I'd already laid out a folder on the kitchen table that morning because I'd been expecting exactly this visit. Deeds, tax bills, survey maps, and further down the stack something extra. "These," I said, "are the original property deeds. My grandfather bought this place in the 1960s. The boundaries haven't changed." I pointed at the highlighted lines on the map. "Everything inside this line is Harlan Ranch. The subdivision is up there." I tapped a small square in the top corner of the map. "They're on land my grandfather leased with very specific terms." The deputy took his time reading. "So you own all of this?" he asked, gesturing out the window at the fields, the barns, the hills, and the cluster of rooftops in the distance. "Yes, sir. Personally, and through the company I run now." He frowned. "What company is that?" I slid the next document across the table. A corporate letterhead, my name under the title Chief Executive Officer, and the name of the HOA Management Corporation that handled hundreds of associations nationwide. "You might recognize this name," I said. "We manage Silver Creek Meadows HOA." He blinked, then bit back a smile. "You're kidding." "I wish I were." We stepped back outside. Karen was pacing by the fence, talking loudly to someone on the phone about noncompliance and visual pollution. "Ma'am," the deputy called, "can you step over here for a minute?" She marched over. "Finally. So, you're going to remove him, right? His ranch activities are completely against our HOA rules. Business use, livestock, unapproved structures." "Ma'am," the deputy interrupted gently, "this is not HOA land. This is private ranch property. He owns it. All of it." She laughed, a harsh, disbelieving sound. "That's impossible. The developer told us this valley would be community green space. Our bylaws say, with respect," the deputy said, "your bylaws don't apply here. They stop at your subdivision line. This ranch is not under your HOA." Her smile dropped. "But he's breaking community standards. We can see his mess from our street. That gives us jurisdiction." I spoke up then. "No, it doesn't. And there's something else you should probably know, Karen." She spun toward me, eyes narrowed. "What?" "I'm also the CEO of the company that manages your HOA's operations and handles your board's compliance letters, accounting, and legal notices." I kept my voice even. "When you send a complaint upstream, it ends up on a desk that ultimately reports to me." For the first time since I met her, she was speechless. The younger deputy couldn't quite hide his grin. "So," I continued, "you've been sending violation notices to the legal owner of this land, trying to apply rules that don't reach past your sidewalk, and you just called the cops on him for being at his own ranch." That's not how this is supposed to work," she stammered. "We're the board. We make the rules." "You make rules for your members," I said. "Your members bought homes in your subdivision. My grandfather never did. Neither did I. You don't outrank the deed. And you definitely don't outrank the county." The deputy cleared his throat. "Ma'am, there's no trespassing here. No crime. This gentleman is on his own property. Calling over a civil HOA dispute that doesn't even apply is a misuse of emergency services. I'm going to note that in the report." Karen flushed red. "So, you're just going to let him destroy our property values? With cows?" The younger deputy finally spoke. "Ma'am, you moved next to a ranch. The ranch didn't move next to you." Neighbors had gathered along the road, phones out, recording. I saw curtains twitching in the nearest houses. Word was going to spread fast. Karen tried one last time. "I'll take this to the regional office. They'll listen to me." "You can do that," I said. "And when you do, the people you talk to will forward your emails into the same system I control. That's how I know how often you've been reporting your neighbors for leaving their trash cans out 15 minutes too long." Her eyes widened. She clearly hadn't expected that. Maybe, I said, this is a good time to talk about how your board has been running things. She stormed back to her car, shaking. The Lexus roared to life and disappeared down the road. The deputies finished their report, shook my hand, and left too. As the dust settled, one of the closer neighbors, middle-aged guy in a polo shirt, walked up to the fence. Is it true? He asked quietly. You really own all this and run the company that runs our every acre, I said. And yeah, new job recently. I was planning to keep my two worlds separate, but your president made that hard. He winced. She fines people for having the wrong shade of beige curtains. I know, I said. I've seen the files. In the weeks that followed, I didn't need to do much. I just made a few phone calls. At corporate, I had the legal department pull Silver Creek Meadows file. Multiple complaints about abuse of power, uneven enforcement, and harassment from the board. Most of it centered around Karen. Their current management contract had a review clause. So we scheduled a review. We sent a neutral regional manager to host a town hall at the clubhouse. I attended, quietly sitting in the back in a clean shirt and jeans, just another ranch neighbor. Homeowners lined up at the microphone. Stories came pouring out. Fines for kids' bikes on porches, threats over small garden beds, angry emails sent at midnight. People were tired. They just hadn't realized how tired until someone gave them a microphone. When it was Karen's turn, she tried to spin it as necessary discipline and protecting property values. But the mood had shifted. Her authority was cracking in real time. At the end, the regional manager cleared her throat and said, given what we've heard tonight and what we've seen in the documentation, our company will not be renewing the current management agreement under the existing board structure. We recommend either reforming the board or selecting a new volunteer group to represent the community. Karen sputtered. You can't do that. You work for us. Actually, the manager said calmly, we work for the ownership entity that contracted us. And they answer to the landowner as well. She glanced toward me briefly. A few weeks later, Karen was voted out in a special election. A new board formed, one that actually wanted to work with the reality of living next to a ranch instead of against it. They sent me a letter, not a notice. We'd like to apologize for how things started, it read. We hope we can be good neighbors. If there's ever a way to coordinate so both the community and the ranch can benefit, we're open to it. I replied with something simple. Clear boundaries, literally and legally. We put in a better fence. I allowed a small walking trail at the far edge, safely away from the cattle, with a big sign that said, you are now leaving the HOA. Sometimes, when I drive past the subdivision at dusk, I see kids pointing at the cattle, fascinated. Parents wave instead of glare. The ranch house lights glow behind them, same as they did in my grandfather's day. Karen moved away that winter to another, high-standard community in another state. Our company handles that HOA too. I don't interfere. I don't have to. If she ever tries to call the cops on another ranch, another cabin, or another neighbor, there's a good chance the complaint, the contract, or the appeal will land in a system that eventually crosses my desk. And I'll remember the day she stood on my dirt road, waving a clipboard at a man she thought was just some nobody with a rusty truck, not realizing he ran almost every HOA she would ever be able to boss around. Out here, the land keeps its own score. The ranch was here before her bylaws, and it'll be here long after her last meeting adjourns.